Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last episode of Insiders Insight Season 3. My name is Afriti और आप देख रहे हैं Power Within YouTube channel. Today, we are going to talk about sports psychology, how to pursue a career in sports psychology होता क्या है और हम उसमें कैसे करियर बना सकते हैं और उसका कितना स्कोप है in India. And to address that, to give us more information for that today, we have with us Miss Kunashni Parikh, who herself is a sports psychologist and is also a clinical psychologist. So I will just add her to our stream. Hi, Miss Kunashni, how are you?
Hi, Apathy. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm great. How was your day?
It was good, very busy, but happy to end it here with this session today.
Thank you, Miss Kunashni, for giving us your time and taking out time from your busy schedule. I really appreciate that. I'll before moving on, I'd like to tell my viewers, मैं अपने viewers को बताना चाहूंगी कि Miss Kunashni is willing to take your doubts. तो अगर आपके कोई भी questions हैं specifically related to sports psychology, तो आप हमें live chat के option से बता सकते हैं, and we will try to solve those doubts with the best possible ability we have. So, Miss Kunashni, before starting the conversation, I'd like to know about you, and also the viewers will also they are very curious to know about you, your experience in the field. So, yeah, over to you, ma'am.
Sure. Thanks. So, a little about me. My name is Kunashni, as you guys all would know, and you can see it there on your screens. So, I'm a sports psychologist and also a mental health practitioner. And my background is also a lot into sports. So, I myself have been a football player for India as the vice-captain and goalkeeper for the Junior India football team. My graduation has been in neuroscience, so my background is in behavioral neuroscience, so understanding the biological basis of the brain, and also with my training in sports psychology and clinical psychology, I now help players, athletes, national and international sports players to enhance their performance through mental training. So that's what I do. I work with sports players from all different kinds of sports, all different kinds of fields, and help them to improve their game with the power of psychology. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Kunashni, for that beautiful introduction, and also congratulations on your achievements. And you have also said that you are a sports psychologist, and that is the topic of our conversation today. तो मैं आपसे जानना चाहूंगी कि what is sports psychology? Sports psychology क्या होता है?
Sure. तो साइकोलॉजी तो हम सब जानते ही हैं. साइकोलॉजी इज द स्टडी ऑफ द माइंड अबाउट ह्यूमन बिहेवियर, कैसे हमारे थॉट्स, हमारे इमोशंस, हमारे सारी चीज़ हमारी लाइफ को अफेक्ट करता है. सो दैट इज इन अ सेंस साइकोलॉजी, व्हिच यू ऑल नो. नाउ व्हेन यू टेक साइकोलॉजी and apply the principles of psychology to the sports world, to the athletes, to the coaches, to the management, then it becomes sports psychology. So basically using psychology to help empower the sports players to control their mind, to deliver peak performance, in times of pressure, when they are stressed. Because sports में तो pressure बहुत high होता है. There's lot of pressure. मतलब आप ओलंपिक्स में जाते हो खेलने, आप नेशनल में जाते हो, आप अपने स्कूल टूर्नामेंट में भी खेलते हो, तो प्रेशर तो हमेशा होता है. एंड यू माइट बी वेरी फिजिकली फिट, टेक्निक आपका अच्छा होगा, आपका स्ट्रेंथ, स्टैमिना सब कुछ अच्छा होगा, लेकिन कंपटीशन के दिन पे अगर आपका माइंड आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं है और आप अच्छे से मतलब नर्वस हो जाएंगे, कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं रहेगा, तो आपका परफॉर्मेंस नहीं होगा. यू माइट बी द बेस्ट प्लेयर ऑन द फील्ड, बट ऑन दैट डे अगर आपका मेंटल स्ट्रेंथ ठीक नहीं है, योर मेंटल टफनेस इज नॉट देयर, देन फिर वो सारे ट्रेनिंग सेशन का कोई फायदा नहीं. सो दैट्स वेयर स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजी कम्स इन. दैट्स व्हाट स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजी इज. मेक श्योर कि जब परफॉर्मेंस करना है तब 100% परफॉर्मेंस ही होगा.
बिल्कुल. So, Ms. Kunashni, I'd like to know from you what exactly do sports psychologists do? अभी तो आपने बता दिया what is sports psychology, but what is exactly the work role of a sports psychologist?
So sports psychologist has basically two roles. So one is performance enhancement, जो sports players का होता है, and the second is mental health counseling. अगर there are any problems off the field, we give counseling for that also. So what are some things that we work with? तो पहले तो हो गया confidence. हर एक athlete को confidence चाहिए. That's the most biggest problem all the players come to. कि मैम मैं practice में बहुत अच्छा हूँ, लेकिन जब match के टाइम आता है तो मतलब nervous हो जाता हूँ, क्या करूँ. इनमें कंट्रोल में नहीं रहता माइंड. सो दैट्स वन थिंग वी फोकस ऑन अ लॉट, राइट? इम्प्रूविंग, बिल्डिंग कॉन्फिडेंस. नेक्स्ट इज मैनेजिंग परफॉर्मेंस एंग्जाइटी. सेम, परफॉर्मेंस के टाइम एंग्जाइटी आता है. हाँ, नेक्स्ट इज हाउ टू बिल्ड द एथलीट्स फोकस. Sometimes what happens also, they get injured. So injury से कैसे बाहर निकलना है, not just physically but psychologically also. How to move forward, resilience training, how to motivate yourself, teamwork. So we have a lot of team sessions. So जो team strategies होती है, how to enhance the bonding of the team, developing leadership qualities, developing the communication between the coach and team. So बहुत सारे जो भी psychological factors होते हैं about performance, that's where we come into place. And also कोई भी और problems होते हैं athletes के life में, 50% of the time that's also the case. Like something happens outside the field, घर में, life में, कुछ भी काम में, and that is affecting their game. So counseling based on all the different counseling strategies that are there.
Before moving further, I'd like to tell my viewers again that Ms. Kunashni is willing to take your doubts. So if there's any kind of question that you have, we can read it from the chat box and we will try our best to answer them as much as possible. Moving on, Ms. Kunashni, अभी आपने जैसे situations बताई हैं और आपने बताया है कि आप कैसे कैसे sportsmen या sportswomen से आप deal करते हैं. But I'd like to know from you कि what exactly happens in a session. जब आप एक सेशन में बैठे हैं एक स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजिस्ट के साथ, तो व्हाट इज द प्रोसेस लाइक?
So sports psychology session is very similar to a counseling session when it's one-on-one. You first have an assessment with the athlete, you talk to them, you understand their game, you understand the level of play, उनका background क्या है, and then you take, जैसे हम अपना examination लेते हैं, we look at the chief complaints. So similarly look at the chief complaints of the athletes. क्या मुश्किल हो रही है उनको? What is their problem? Is there a problem with the coach? Is there a problem with their confidence? Is there a problem with their concentration? जो भी problem है, first we look at that, address that, learn more about that. So it's very similar to a normal counseling session. Difference is you're working with sports players और थोड़ी जो techniques होते हैं sports psychology वो थोड़े अलग होते हैं.
Different.
So that's basically what happens in this session.
Okay. और जब हम एक एथलीट को असेस करते हैं, when an athlete comes to you and they come for help or guidance, so what is the assessing criteria or how do you assess that particular athlete?
So mostly what I do is a lot of history taking, interview taking with the athlete. So sometimes जो भी problem हो रही है उनको, it didn't start at that point. मतलब सालों से that problem has been going on. So it's very important to take the history of the athlete. ये समझना कि ये problem कब से हो रही है, injury बार बार हो रही है, क्यों हो रही है, confidence problem कब से हो रहा है. So you get to the root of the cause. कहाँ से और क्यों हो रहा है ये सब. So that's how I start the whole assessment process. History taking के साथ, behavioral observation. You also sometimes talk to the coaches, talk to the parents, get insights from them. And if you feel अगर कोई paper pencil test की ज़रूरत है, so you can also do a lot of assessments like that. So for sports related, there are few assessments. One that comes to mind is something called TOPS, which is test of performance strategy. ये होता है. Then sports related anxiety का भी test होता है. So as a psychologist, whatever you feel इस athlete को test करने की ज़रूरत होती है, you can go for that. So that's basically the assessment process.
Okay. So, Miss Kunashni, is there any kind of is it possible that a particular sports psychologist is dedicated to only a particular sports? जैसे एक sports psychologist professional dedicated to the field of cricket. Is it like that, or there can be a general sports psychologist as well?
So yes, some sports psychologists focus on very specific sports because of their own professional background and their expertise, and they know so much about cricket. They know everything. They understand the players, so they go for cricket. पर ऐसा नहीं होता कि हर एक sports psychologist एक ही sport के साथ काम करता है. Normally, usually sports psychologists work generally with all sports. So I myself will be working with a badminton player, will be working with a tennis player, with a swimmer, chess player, football player. जो भी sports है, they come to me because the similarity between all sports is performance. So we look at performance strategies, performance sports, so performance psychology as we call it. It's similar जैसे psychology में. So you can ask, are there some psychologists who only do OCD? Are there some psychologists who only take anxiety? And yes, ऐसे होता है, right? Like they focus only on that.
Very good.
But they can cater to the other clients also. So sports में भी ऐसे होता है, but generally we look at mostly all sports to help most sports players.
Thank you, Ms. Kunashni. We have a question from a viewer, and they're asking which techniques do you use for sports players or on sports players?
So techniques we use, the four main techniques which are used in sports psychology, the very famous ones. So one is visualization. It's a very powerful technique, and that goes in any kind of mental training when we start in sports. Another one is self-talk, which is then other kinds of psychology as well, but it's used a lot for sports players. So self-talk analysis, changing your self-talk. Along with that, we do a lot of goal setting, so help athletes set their goals. Yes, you want to play for India, want to play for the Olympics, but what are the small goals you need to set in order to reach there? And the different types of performance goals and procedure goals, process goals, these sub we teach them. And finally, we also look at anxiety management, so pressure, how to handle that pressure. So a lot of maybe JPMR, a lot of mindfulness, anything basically to help them get control of their muscles, calm them down. तो ये सब चीजें होती है.
And Ms. Kunashni, since you are a sports psychologist and you also have a background in sports, I'd like to know from you, like, what was your journey in this field? Why did you pick this career? Ki, okay, I want to become a sports psychologist. So, what led you to a career in this field?
So my journey is very interesting. So पहले तो I was always a sports player, right? And be it karate, football, athletics, gymnastics, जो भी है मैंने try किया and absolutely fell in love with it. फिर जब स्कूल में मैंने psychology का subject लिया, I fell in love with psychology, the science of the mind, and I realized this is what I want to do. So studying psychology, I realized, there's so many applications to this. What do I want to do with this particular field? Like, how do I want to use this science? And then I remember that when I was playing football, so एक match का example देती हूँ, I remember that my confidence was super low. I know I was a good player. I know everything was right, but I just could not perform in that one match. The opponent was there, and everybody was shouting, everybody was screaming, but there was some issue in the field at that time. And some other incident that happened is that actually I was playing for the India camp. अगर आपने चक दे इंडिया देखा होगा, so exact similar situation, we were in the camp but for football instead. And एक match चल रहा था, and there was one player, very strong player, एकदम tough and running straight to me. I was the goalkeeper. So goal पे अकेली मैं और सामने एक player आ रहा है with full force with the ball only towards me and ready to shoot. So I'm getting ready and I have to prove myself, right? मतलब बस goal save करना ही है. So they are coming. I start charging. I dive. I save the ball. Ball मेरे हाथ में आ जाता है. But unfortunately, that player's leg also मेरे मुंह पे आ जाता है. And with her knee, she hit my nose. And it started bleeding and all. And because of that, I had to be dropped from the Indian team. And I could not travel with them. I could not go for the matches. And post that, I went into this. It happens as sports player when you go for injury, you're not able to come back, you don't feel like playing, you get nervous. फिर से जब मैं जाने वाली थी field पे, then I was scared. Anytime one-on-one situation comes, players coming the ball, मैं डर जाती थी. I didn't know what to do. I knew the technique, but mind block, right? So reflecting on my own situation, my own sports, I realized कि उस time पे अगर मुझे कोई help मिला था, sports psychology, so any kind of mental training, I would have come back much faster. Maybe in 1 month or 2 months, I would be back at my game. But because of that lack of resource, it took me much longer. 1-2 years coming out, maybe mild depression, whatever it is. Because you're playing at such high stakes, and then you start feeling guilty. You start feeling you let your game down, you let your country down. So many things are going on, right, in sports players' mind. So if they can get that support at the right time, it's going to be so helpful. And India doesn't lack any kind of talent, right? There's so much talent. There's so many players out there. लेकिन फिर भी what happens at the Olympics? What happens at all these national competitions? क्यों हम नहीं खेल पाते? क्या मिसिंग है? हमारा स्ट्रेंथ अच्छा है, हमारा गेम अच्छा है, फिर क्या हो जाता है? बाहर के अपोनेंट को देख के हम डर जाते हैं. फॉरेन प्लेयर को देख के लगता है कि नहीं, हमारा गेम इतना अच्छा नहीं. क्यों नहीं है? Why is that? That's all in the mind. So if I can come in as a sports psychologist and other sports psychologists who are there who can help these players to get out, well, that answers the question why I got into sports psychology and why I want to become a sports psychologist.
Very beautiful journey, I must say, Ms. Kunashni. And we have this question about the eligibility criteria. A lot of people have put in their stories as well, like what is it that they are pursuing. I'd like to tell my viewers, मैं अपने viewers को बताना चाहूंगी कि eligibility के बारे में हम थोड़ी सी देर में आ रहे हैं, उसके बारे में हम लोग बात करेंगे. पर उससे पहले एलिजिबिलिटी में स्कोप के बारे में जानने से पहले मैं आपसे जानना चाहूंगी, Ms. Kunashni, since you are a sports psychologist and you are a practicing sports psychologist, so what is like your work like? What is the average day look like for a sports psychologist?
So the answer is it's completely up to you. आप कहाँ पे काम करना चाहते हैं? आप एक टीम के साथ काम करना चाहते हैं, एक कंपनी में काम करना चाहते हैं, या आप इंडिपेंडेंटली प्रैक्टिस करना चाहते हैं? So for me, I work as an independent consultant. So many different sports players come to me for individual sessions, and then it's in my control when to schedule the sessions. Flexibility मिलती है मुझे ऐसे. And if any club, any kind of academy wants to have that services, then I dedicate some time to that also. So a day in the life is basically how you structure it. आप कितनी सेशन लेना चाहते हो, आप कौन से गेम्स के साथ वर्क करना चाहते हो. That's a day in the life of like somebody who's working independently like me. कोई साइकोलॉजिस्ट होते हैं जो एक ही टीम के साथ काम करते हैं morning to evening, and then they monitor the whole team's practice and they work just with that academy. So that life will be different. So it's up to you. आप independently काम करना चाहते हो या एक टीम के साथ काम करना चाहते हो. There's also a Sports Authority of India who hires sports psychologists. तो अगर आप वहाँ पे काम करते हो तो वहाँ का स्ट्रक्चर अलग होगा, वहाँ के सेशंस they'll be different. So then it's up to वहाँ के how they structure it. So that's the day in the life of how you work. And since मैं सिर्फ sports players के साथ काम नहीं करती हूँ, I also work with the general population, any other kind of cases. Then I add that in as well to my daily schedule and manage that accordingly.
So, Ms. Kunashni, जैसे talking about sports psychology, it is still not, it's not still that mainstream in the field of psychology. When we look at the field of psychology, we know about counseling, clinical, and we know about organization and also rehabilitation. But sports psychology is not that much like in the mainstream of psychology. I'd like to know from you, what is the scope and what is the demand like of a sports psychologist in India?
So as you rightly said, first of all, psychology is so poorly understood. Mental health is not,
Yes.
there's not so much awareness about it. Psychology का ही ऐसा ही हालत है. Psychology, the state of psychology is like this. You can imagine how much more less it is for sports psychology. So yes, the
Yes.
awareness is less, but I would say the scope is very big because India is a sporting nation. There are a lot of sports being played, lot of different athletes out there. The only thing is जो अगर स्कोप की बात करें तो the jobs as a sports psychologist, they're not very well visible, they're not very well listed कि हाँ
Yes.
हमको sports psychologist की जरूरत है. But as a sports psychologist, if you're planning to make it your career, you have to be the one to take that initiative, approach the clubs, approach the players, and say this is what I can offer. So that awareness,
Okay.
that change of bringing about psychology to sports has to start at the grassroots level. Has to start with you as a psychologist, making that wave. And then slowly India will start introducing. अगर आप top teams पे देखें, top national level पे देखते हो, तो coaches होते हैं, physiotherapists होते हैं, masseuse भी होते हैं, but psychologists not so common, right? So once that awareness
true.
kicks in, is gonna come in. Sometimes sports nutritionists भी होते हैं, but psychologists भी होते हैं. So it's definitely something that as a psychologist we have to change.
Definitely. Very rightly said, Ms. Kunashni. And coming to the most requested question from our viewers, and also the question that I have for you, we would like to know what is the eligibility criteria to becoming a sports psychologist. Now, I'd like to, I'll just quickly brief you about the questions that have been asked. So, there's someone who is pursuing their master's from IGNU. There's someone who is doing their master's in organizational psychology. There's someone who's doing their UGC NETCA preparation. So they'd like to know what is the eligibility criteria, because mostly the questions have come कि हमने masters in psychology किया हुआ है. So if you could just guide us through the steps or the eligibility criteria of becoming a sports psychologist.
Sure. So first, to be a sports psychologist, I always tell this to all the students that you have to first be a psychologist. So you have to follow that path. So अपने graduation में you have to do your psychology. Post graduation में you have to do your masters in psychology as well. So there are two ways you can go about it. One is do your masters in sports psychology, and then you can start practicing as sports psychologist. Second is do your masters in regular psychology, mostly counseling or clinical. Organization will be a little difficult to make that jump. So counseling and clinical में आप masters करेंगे. उसके बाद you need to get work experience or internship experience under some sports psychologist to understand how to work with the athletes, what are the techniques involved, and then you can start working. When it comes to licensing procedures, इंडिया में there is no such rule कि इसके बाद आप sports psychologist बन सकते हैं, but of course there are rules of being a psychologist. So follow those guidelines, and then you can work with the kind of population you want to work. in abroad, different countries, there are different restrictions, different licensing procedures, sports psychologists के लिए, other psychologists से. So you have to follow the rules of where you are practicing. India में, like I said, sports psychologist definitely के लिए there's not a particular license, but there is for psychology. So do your psychology and then get that work experience, get that internship experience, then you can slowly start your practice.
And is it essential to have a background in sports? क्या sports से आपका background होना जरूरी है in order to become a sports psychologist?
So it definitely helps. अगर आपका background sports में है, तो you can understand the players better, you can relate to them better. जो वो कह रहे हैं आप अच्छे से समझ सकते हो, आप अपने experience से वो कर सकते हो, और players भी comfortable feel होता है कि हाँ ये जानते हैं. And if they give some small technical work, hockey में ऐसे ये pass ये turn, you know what they're saying. So you can identify accordingly, make your discussion or conversation like that. Having said that, it's not a must, I should be a sports player to be a sports psychologist. Sometimes it's okay to not know about so much information about different games, but have that willingness to help out. So yes, having sports background definitely helps you yourself and for the athletes and organization to feel comfortable, but it is not a necessary factor. To answer this question, I say, जब आप psychologist के साथ काम करते हो, when you're working with people from different kinds of professions, say you're working with businessmen or you're working with professors, right? They're counseling. You don't have to be a businessman to help them with their mental health, with their strategy, right? You don't have to be working in the industry to help them. You are a psychologist, so your skills you're bringing to the table is psychological performance enhancement. And if you know knowledge about their sport, it's going to help you. But it's not a necessary. How will I help them? If you understand human psychology, you will be able to help.
So just to make it clear, sports में background होना, it is not important, but it is slightly preferable. Since you have that background, so you'll be able to, better guide the sports person who comes to you, right?
Yes. And also because of that sports background, your job scope also becomes better. If they see that you also are a sports player, they'll be more, ready to hire you. So that's also another factor.
So, Miss Kunashni, since you are a sports psychologist, I'd like to know, what is the work atmosphere like? Like, you're practicing independently right now, but can we work in an organization, link ourselves to an organization and work as well?
Definitely. And every organization will have their own ethics, work ethics and work structure. And that's why I would say, choose your organization very wisely. Know what they're looking for, what exact services they're looking for, and how you can help them. So always find that best fit. But yes, definitely you can work with organizations, government bodies, or just national teams, or just one academy. It can be just for one season, it can be for the whole year contract. So there are a lot of different ways to go about that as well.
Okay, we have one question from our viewer, Ms. Kunashni, and I'll quickly take that up. Do professional teams in India have started using sports psychologists, or I think they mean hiring sports psychologists? Because according to them, BCCI, one of the richest sporting board, does not have one. So if you could just tell us your views on that.
Yes, like we talked about earlier, high level pay, you have so many different resources, but when it comes to psychology, that is something that's lacking. And this is also because there's a huge myth that's out there, psychologists की क्या ज़रूरत है? Our players are not mad, ये पागल नहीं है. Psychologist क्या करेगा? So there's huge misconception about how psychology can improve performance and help the game. So that's why, whether it's school level or up to the BCCI level, you don't have that say. Yes, BCCI does hire and recruit a sports psychologist, on a timely basis from time to time. But to the best of my knowledge, it's not, a strategic thing that's going on, and that training is not being going on of a continuous level. So again, last minute पे अच्छा psychology की ज़रूरत है, let's come in. But it doesn't work like that. Your mental training needs to go hand in hand with your physical training. तो ही changes दिखेंगे. Right? Hiring just for a season, hiring just for this, yes, it will help. It will ease the players, get them to talk whatever's on their mind. But this process needs to start much earlier. Just like any kind of, before your match, you don't learn how to bowl or serve or bat.
Definitely.
So match के एक दिन पहले, why should you learn how to become confident or how to handle pressure? That also takes time. Over time, training your mind takes time. The more you invest in that, आपकी game के लिए अच्छा होगा.
Okay, and just making it clear, कि Sports Authority of India, they do hire sports psychologists, right?
Yes, Sports Authority of India, they do hire sports psychologists. Again, it's very limited. If you see the job posting, they have like jobs for like maybe one or two sports psychologists for the entire body, for the entire institution. They keep adding to that. So again, I'm not entirely sure about the structure of the entire program, but to the best of my knowledge, जो mental training athletes को मिलनी चाहिए regular basis पे, वो नहीं मिलती, because you can see the ratio. Right? You have hundreds of athletes and one psychologist. It's difficult. Then it becomes, correction based. And कोई problem है तो athlete आएगा. It should not be like that. It should be हर एक को mental training मिलना चाहिए.
Ms. Kunashni, I'd like you to repeat कि what are the steps to becoming a sports psychologist? अभी हमने eligibility की बात कर ली है, but if you could just brief us about the steps कि पहले bachelor's फिर master's, if you could just guide us through that.
Sure. तो पहले स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजिस्ट बनने के लिए योर बैचलर शुड बी इन साइकोलॉजी, बीए और बीएससी साइकोलॉजी में. उसके बाद गो ऑन टू योर मास्टर्स इन साइकोलॉजी, सो एमए और एमएससी इन साइकोलॉजी. दिस आल्सो ऑप्शन टू डू योर एमए एमएससी इन स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजी. और इंडिया में कुछ इंस्टीट्यूशंस है, 4 दैट कम टू माय माइंड, जहाँ पे आप कर सकते हैं. एंड अब्रॉड देयर आर मेनी मोर मास्टर्स इन स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजी जो आप कर सकते हैं. उसके बाद यू हैव अ वेरी मच बेटर अंडरस्टैंडिंग about the specialized skills involved as a sports psychologist practitioner, और आप कर सकते हैं. इंडिया में because there are not so many bodies, and if you're not ready to take that path of masters in sports psychology, एक दूसरा ऑप्शन भी है, आप साइकोलॉजी में अपना मास्टर्स कीजिए और इसके बाद get that relevant work experience, get that internship, work with a sports psychologist at least for a year or two, so you understand the field completely, and then you can start practicing. So ये steps है sports psychologist बनने के.
मिस कुनशनी, इसी से जुड़ा हुआ मेरा अगला सवाल आपसे है. अभी आपने इंस्टीट्यूट्स और ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का मेंशन किया है, सो इफ यू कुड जस्ट नेम दोस इंस्टीट्यूट्स एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, द डिग्री और द कोर्स दैट दे प्रोवाइड इन स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजी.
श्योर. तो इंडिया में मैं एक जानती हूँ विच इज़ गुरु नानक देव यूनिवर्सिटी, जो अमृतसर में है, जो स्पोर्ट्स साइकोलॉजीज में मास्टर्स ऑफर करते हैं. देयर इज ऑल्सो अनदर यूनिवर्सिटी इन तमिलनाडु, इन चेन्नई. नाम नहीं याद आ रहा है, but that is another one that's there. And abroad, if you're looking to go for, there are a lot of them available in the UK and Australia. These are main hubs for sports sciences. So if you look at UK, there's universities called Brunel, there's university called Loughborough, and ये मतलब थोड़ी और advanced होते हैं. The program is more robust. They have sometimes research factors associated with as well. जो इंडिया में masters program होते हैं, the robustness of the program is not very well established. They're very new. तो अगर आप लोगों से पूछेंगे भी कि क्या एक्सपीरियंस है, क्या करना चाहिए, इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू गेट क्लियर आंसर्स ऑफ हाउ रिगरस दैट प्रोग्राम इज. तो ये क्योंकि स्कोप अभी शुरू हुआ है ऑल दीज प्रोग्राम्स, सो दैट्स द स्टेज of how it is. So definitely, if you want to go do your sports psychology, just based on the curriculum and the kind of training you'll get abroad is a better feature for all these kind of trainings. Having said that, ऐसा नहीं है कि बाहर जाके ही अच्छा होगा. In India also, explore the options, see what works best for you.
We have a question from our viewer, or may quickly I'd like to take that up. Can someone who doesn't have an undergraduate in psychology but has a master's in psychology, which is distance education, can become a sports psychologist?
So it depends on what kind of masters it is. So if your masters qualifies you to practice as a psychologist, then by default you will be allowed to practice as a sports psychologist as well. So that is just the qualifying factor. Now when it comes to the test of your skills and test your trainings, that since you've not studied sports psychology, it will only come once, like I said, you take an apprenticeship, take an internship with a mentor, with a sports psychologist, and get those relevant skills. तो हाँ, पहले देखिए कि जो आपने डिग्री की है, does that qualify you to be a psychologist? उसके बाद जो sports psychology relevant techniques है, try to figure that out, try to learn that from all the resources that are available there.
Lastly, I'd like to know from you, are there any kind of challenges that you have faced in the past or you face in this profession?
Yeah, definitely. तो पहले तो होता है explaining to the athletes कि ये profession होता क्या है and how can I help you? Because ये लोग सोचते हैं कि ये क्या है. Actually, one boxer I was working with, he's the India number 2 boxer, and he said कि मैम स्पोर्ट्स अथॉरिटी में हाँ हमारा मतलब सेशन होते थे, लेकिन हम नहीं जाते, हम स्किप करते थे. तो सोचते थे कि आफ्टरनून में जाके रेस्ट करेंगे, क्या साइकोलॉजी का सेशन. लेकिन आपके साथ बात करने के बाद लगता है कि नहीं, जाना चाहिए था सेशन के लिए. So it's really my biggest challenge is making these athletes understand कि जो sports psychology का session है, जो mental training कर सकता है आपके game के लिए is something that's going to take your game to a much more advanced level and it's going to make you one of the best players that's out there. So this is the challenge I face, to making players, making companies, making academies understand how exactly sports psychology will help. This is the main challenge. And the second challenge I face is that एथलीट ने एक सेशन कर लिया मेरे साथ, ओके, आई गिव देम वन ट्रेनिंग, वन टेक्निक, सम काइंड ऑफ काउंसलिंग, नेक्स्ट डे मैच खेला, डे आफ्टर दैट थर्ड डे दे कॉल मी से मैम आपके साथ सेशन हुआ लेकिन हार गया मैम मैच. सो इट्स एज इफ दे थिंक एक सेशन करने के बाद नहीं मैं अभी साइकोलॉजी का सेशन ले लिया अब तो मैच जीतने वाला. सो दैट इज द माइंडसेट कि एक सेशन लेने से नाउ आई विल विन द मैच. सो इट्स नॉट अ मैजिक पिल, इट्स नॉट लाइक एक करके ये होगा. सो दैट्स अनदर चैलेंज आई फेस, making athletes understand that's a long-term process. Mental training does take time, effort, investment, and you have to put in that effort over time, just like a physical training, like we discussed. एक दिन में आप batting bowling नहीं सीख सकते, तो how can you expect to train your mind? So these are the challenges.
And moving on, I'd like to give the floor to you now, since you've talked about these challenges. So is there any kind of like a piece of advice that you would like to give to the future sports psychology aspirants, or if you want to tell us something about yourself? So over to you.
Sure. Definitely. What I'd like to tell all the students out there who are so interested in sports psychology is before you look into sports psychology and focus your mind on becoming a sports psychologist, first train yourself and develop your skills to become a good psychologist. If you're a good psychologist, you can apply your skills and principles to any field, whether it's a sports player who's coming to you or any kind of profession. So don't think that sports psychology is a very specialized thing. No, it comes from the very basic structure of being a good psychology practitioner. So wherever you are studying right now, whatever level, learn and master your skills in everything. All the courses, whether it's developmental psychology, personality psychology, ये सब बाद में आपको पता चलेगा कि how valuable all this learning was. There is neuropsychology, brain sciences, बाद में ये काम आएगा. So make yourself an all-round good psychologist. फिर बाद में जाके you can perform well in any kind of field. And अगर आपको internship करने की का interest है, if you want to do an internship in sports psychology, I currently have a sports psychology internship that I'm offering to all the students out there at the graduation level, at the master's level, to understand more about sports psychology, the theory, the background, and also the techniques that I use, which will help you in your sport as well, if you're a sports player, to use those techniques, and help you if you're interested in sports psychology in the future also to understand, along with the research component. If you're focused on research or focused on going to university abroad, they look at this research factor as well. So if you're interested, you can always reach out to me and we can get started on the sports psychology research internship.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kunashni. With this, we come to an end of today's episode. Once again, I'd like to thank you, Ms. Kunashni, for giving us your time and giving us beautiful insights, wonderful insights to sports psychology.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Akriti. It was a lovely, wonderful evening. And I'm so glad that you have taken this initiative to spread the word of psychology everywhere. So it was really my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you to the viewers who were with us with this in this course of interview. With this, we come to an end of Insiders Insight Season 3. अगर आप चाहते हैं हम और ऐसे ही वीडियोस करें और ऐसे ही हम लोग एपिसोड्स लेकर आए, आप हमें न्यू recommendations दे सकते हैं in the comment section. Please like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel Power Within. Share it with your contacts so that they are also able to find the one-stop solution for all psychology aspirants, which is Power Within. Thank you, Ms. Kunashni, again for joining in.